we will trim this buffer out.
Well, people go to sleep before we start.
Oh dear. All right, just like to welcome everyone rolling in. We'll give it another minute and a half before we get started. All right, I think it's time to get started. So I'll just like to welcome everyone for joining today's session. Today we are very excited to be hosting a special session co-developed with Mike Wilson, CEO of GoExporting.com and Alibaba.com. Today we're going to talk about opportunities and methods for approaching new markets in the EU. This is specifically catered to North American businesses, although many of the facts and opportunities that we cover are going to be relevant for other regions as well. So before we get started, today we're going to be covering a pretty long or pretty extensive agenda. We're going to start with some background on trade relations between the United States and the European Union. Then we're going to deep dive some key industry data and look into some specific opportunities before we will share a very special gift with those in attendance today. Then we're going to pass the time to our co-host, Mike, who is going to go through a practical guide on how to approach those new markets in the EU. So to get started, a little bit of background about Alibaba.com, where I have worked now for the past 9 years. I've held all types of roles. Today it might be a little more akin to an economist, but we'll leave it at that. Presently, my role is to develop the supply base for United States businesses who would like to sell globally. So just to give you a quick snapshot of what Alibaba is doing to support international trade. We have suppliers from all around the world, including East Asia, Europe, and another hub here in North America. And our buyer base has stated preference, of course, depending on what they're looking for. So the relative capabilities in terms of mass production at low cost in East Asia is very difficult to compete with in many other regions. Whereas in a place like Europe, you have very high quality standards, brand halos, and so on. Here in the United States, suppliers enjoy access to a very large consumer market with very short lead times and a lot of ease of doing business, such as the regulatory framework and so on. Just to give you a sense for our top buyer regions, United States sits here at the very top, followed by India, Canada, and Brazil. Number 5 being Mexico means that on this list, the 3 out of the top 5 are North American buyer bases. Europe has a strong showing. If I extended this list to the top 20, you would see most of the usual suspects: France, Germany, UK, Spain for certain categories, and so on. Moving on, we have a fairly robust tool set to support suppliers who would like to approach opportunities in foreign markets. Those opportunities have also given us stated preferences, what they're looking for when doing business with a new supplier, particularly overseas. So a supplier does not need to have all of these capabilities to compete effectively on a global marketplace like Alibaba.com, but having a couple of these does really set you up for success. So just a little bit about who we are. We were established roughly 25 years ago as the first global B2B marketplace. It was at the time very akin to a yellow pages or directory of OEM supply. Now we have evolved into a full suite marketplace for B2B transactions, lead gen, and so on. So last things first, I just want to frame the data points that we're going to look at by letting you know we've done a lot of research to put this together. And should you want to look into any of the specific reports, you would be very welcome to do so. We also harmonized a lot of these with Alibaba platform data, meaning we have significant actual opportunities to share as well. So to start with the background, the trade between the United States and Europe is essentially the largest trade bloc in the world. If you factor in the purchasing power of your average consumer in Europe, it's actually the largest market, unified single market on planet Earth. The trade is expected to reach $1 trillion plus in the very short term, and we're going to look at some of those trends that are driving those that massive trade volume here next. Excuse me. Yep. So what is driving these opportunities? We have institutional opportunities. We have consumer culture opportunities. So of those institutions, a couple are named here. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has all kinds of resources for exporters who are seeking opportunities in Europe. On top of that, there is the Small Business Association as well, and the Exim Bank. All of these have resources in terms of financial opportunities and networking that can help you find opportunities in the EU. So to look at a few of the top industries for trade between the US and Europe, I've highlighted 6, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but I've also included Alibaba industry reports later on for you to digest on your own. So the pharmaceutical industry, as you can see, is a massive or has a massive traded volume. The imports from the EU, as you can see here, including top categories such as biologics, right, testing kits, vaccines, generic drugs, over-the-counter drugs, and other types of diagnostics testing equipment. The U.S. is actually a top exporter worldwide for medical devices, and it shows with the trade volumes in Europe. Down near the bottom, you will see the top 3 represented nations in terms of trade volume, particularly import into the EU. So you see, and you will see a very common trend here, where Germany and France will almost always be in the top 2. Italy and Amsterdam and Spain vying for the 3rd rank in most other categories. If we have a quick look at consumer electronics, so this would include all types of devices, smart homes, smart home products, wearable devices, smartphones, cables, and so on. This is definitely an industry where a lot of volume is being exported to the EU. We can see that, again, Germany and France are occupying the top space with $5 and $3 billion volume respectively. And you can see that the total volume is pushing 30 billion and expected to continue to grow. Taking a pivot to health and wellness, this include healthcare supplements like vitamins, skincare products, even fitness equipment. and health foods being a key aspect. Now, there is some overlap with the food and beverage industry that we'll also investigate here in a moment. But you can see again, the general trend is a very sharp increase overall in the entire European Union exports in these categories. And you can also see a common trend where Germany ranks top, now followed by UK, and then France in third place. Looking at that food and beverage industry, we can see sizable opportunity as well. This is today roughly a $20 billion industry for export, with the biggest or the fastest growing subcategories, including organic foods, snacks, beverages, dairy and meat products. Home and garden, our next to last industry here. Again, the usual suspects in terms of the top importers, the largest markets being Germany, UK, and France. The products being imported and also with a growing rate would be furniture, tools, home decor, lighting, and DIY kits. So basically, everything that you'd see in the Home Depot or your Lowe's, this is going to be a top export to the EU. And finally, renewable energy is a massive trend right now, all around the world, not just in the EU. But one thing that is really driving the adoption of renewable energy, and here I'm focused on the capital inputs, so equipment, other infrastructure items like cables for power gen and transmission. And then, of course, the specific types of renewable generation technologies. So the government institutions in Europe have really wholeheartedly committed to having a larger mix of renewables in their energy mix, and this trend is expected to actually increase over time, and it's not forecasted to plateau anytime soon. So, what are some of the challenges that SMBs face today when exploring export opportunities to Europe? So the first big bucket would be regulatory compliance. So just like we have our certification requirements, such as FDA in the United States, there are other requirements and different rule sets in Europe to make sure that the product that you are looking to export is compliant to import into the EU. Another factor, of course, is going to be a fairly mature base of competitors. They have enjoyed their own home market territory for some time. There's already established players. So you really need to bring something new in those spaces if you're going to seize a sizable part of the market share. And the last factor that I've highlighted for you today is the brand loyalty and trust. So European consumers are very picky when it comes to brand quality aspects, and also they do have a stated preference for product that comes from their own country at times. Now, that doesn't mean that those products are always available, which is certainly behind the massive volume of product traded to the EU. And just to highlight some of those resources that are available for SMBs to leverage if they are looking to export into European markets. So I mentioned already the government support. So look into the U.S. Chamber of Commerce programs. They are looking for something like a 15% increase year on year export volume to the EU. There's also those initiatives that I mentioned briefly, the Exim Bank, SBA STEP program, and so on, that can help provide both financial and networking support for you. Take advantage of the established trade agreements. There's lots of specific trade agreements as well as general trade agreements in place, including the transatlantic one that is just about complete. That can help businesses avoid tariffs and protect their intellectual property and other types of concerns that go along with export. And finally, those green policies that I mentioned are driving a major uptick in sustainable spaces. It could be recyclable materials, or it could be the example I shared earlier, renewable energy, infrastructure, and capital inputs. So I mentioned that we would have a little gift for you today. Here you will see we've generated a few industry reports specifically using Alibaba platform site data, so you can get a very practical sense of the size of opportunity should you want to sell through something like an e-commerce marketplace. Simply scan these codes, take a screenshot, scan them later, and you will be able to enjoy those reports. And of course, should your industry not be included in this analysis, the last QR here is my own calendar, and you can set up a time and tell me what industry you're in, and we'll do a deep dive together. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce Mike Wilson back to our webinar, who's going to offer some more practical guidance on export to the EU. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for that introduction. It was very interesting. Thank you. Well, greetings, everyone, from very cold and wet Manchester in the UK. I'm just going to share my presentation. Okay, hopefully you can see that now. Okay, so we're going to explore exporting to the European Union. As we've already looked at, we'll be covering what is all about the European Union, really. What is it? Who's in it? Some market statistics, although we'll skip over those a little bit because we've already gone through some of that. The business and administrative structure, key sectors and opportunities. I may have some slightly different ones than have been talked about so far. And also then how you can succeed in the European market, the business culture, the approach to the market, and what kind of approach should you be taking. If there are any questions, please do put them in the text box, and we'll be pleased to have a look at them at the end. So just a little bit about me. My name is Mike Wilson. I'm a founder of Go Exporting. So I've been in international business for 35 years. We specialize in helping companies to go international, whether it's researching markets or finding new opportunities, finding new distributors, finding customers, and so on. So we're experts at helping companies to expand. We've worked with a lot of US companies, for example. So firstly, what is the EU? You'll hear the term, but what is it? It's an economic and political union comprising of 27 countries, which governs common economic, social, and security policies. There are some common laws, labor laws, for example, human rights, and effectively there's a common border between all of the countries. So once you enter into one EU country, theoretically you can travel between all of the rest free without showing a passport or anything like that. And the same with goods. Once they're into the EU, they have free movement around the whole of the European Union. The UK, as you can see, is colored differently here, and that's because we made the strange decision to leave the EU back in 2020. So now we're outside of the bloc, and that does mean that trading with the UK is now slightly different than trading with the EU. So there are some slightly different rules and some considerations you would need to take into account. We'll go through that a little bit later. So there are 27 countries, as I said, in the EU. Used to be 28 with the UK, and there are also candidate countries that are looking to join, such as Ukraine, Turkey, Serbia, Montenegro, and so on, that are going down the process of looking to join. It can be a very long process, so with the exception of Ukraine, they may take a little bit of time for those to join. Current population is around 452 million, and as we've said, it's a customs union, or it's a single market. So it's it's like entering into the US, for example. Once you've entered into Germany, it's a single market for the rest of the EU. And overall, we're the #3 trading partner of the US from my figures in 2023. And there is a strong demand for US goods and services. Clearly, there is demand, and loyalty to European products. But I think, as Eric said, if there are products that have something different to offer, then American products are very well received, and the expectation is that they're going to be of good quality, and they're going to be, you know, probably more advanced or have advanced technology within them. One key element of the EU is that there is a common currency of the euro, which is used in 20 of the countries. Not all of the countries have adopted it for political reasons mainly, but of the others, 20 of them, such as Germany, France, and so on, do have the same currency, which makes trading a lot easier and there's no exchange issues. So what about the key EU data? We said the population. The real GDP is around $24 trillion. Growth very slow in 2023, 0.45%, but it's still recovering from COVID, but it is on the upward trend. GDP per capita is one of the highest in the world. If you look at over the whole of the 27 countries, it's around $54,000 per head. Obviously, there are some countries in there with much higher than that, and some that bring down the average, such as the sort of Balkan countries and so on. With GDP by sector, I mean, agriculture is 1.6% of the overall GDP. Industry is 25.1%, and services make up the balance. So it's a very service-led economy throughout the whole of the EU, as is the UK. And exports of goods and services from the EU are around 9.7 trillion per year out to the whole world, and imports around 9 trillion. So there's a strong, a lot of imports coming into the EU. So there's definitely a demand for US products and from products from other countries. So what are some of the current main US exports to the EU? We have machinery, which includes computers, which is the largest one. Electrical machinery and equipment. Vehicles is obviously a big one. Aircraft, spacecraft, optical, technical, medical apparatus. Pharmaceuticals, as Eric's already pointed out, is a huge industry, both ways. I mean, the EU has a strong pharmaceuticals industry as well. Plastics and plastic articles, although they have to say that in the EU there's a big trend away from plastic as far as possible, certainly in terms of packaging. There's there's not just legally, there's also a consumer drive to move away from plastic, and we complain if there's too much plastic packaging in products. For example, Amazon's had to reduce it completely, look at different packaging methods to satisfy that. And there's a lot of work on recycling as well, which is recycling plastics and looking at the effect on marine life. For example, I've got a client who manufactures kayaks out of recycled plastic, for example, and their whole ethos is on the marine economy and the marine life and the health of the oceans, for example. Gems and precious metals, organic chemicals, mineral fuels, including oil. So you can see some of the major ones, probably what you would expect to be the major imports or exports from to the EU from the US. So some of those main industries, again, we've looked at some of them already. Motor vehicles, it's a huge industry within the EU, 773 billion, with a strong growth from 2022. The EU is amongst the largest and most technologically advanced regions of the world, and its base includes, ferrous, non-ferrous metals production right across the board, pharmaceuticals that we've seen, shipbuilding, logistics. It's a very dynamic industrial base. Machinery and equipment, food products, which has already been mentioned. Food and beverages is a key area. Chemicals and chemical products, and the pharmaceutical products. So these are some of the main industries within the EU itself. The motor vehicle sector, for example, represents 13% of the total value of EU production, with motor vehicles accounting for approximately 447 billion of that total. So it's a thriving industry. So anyone that's supplying anything into the automotive industry would find a good market here, not just with the automotive producers, but also the sort of tier 2 suppliers and the aggregators as well. So what are the key industrial regions within the EU? We've got northern Italy. It's a strong area for automotive. Fiat's based there, for example. Textiles and fashion around Milan. It's well known for it's a fashion hub, of course. Machinery and equipment, strong presence of industrial machinery manufacturers. And food and beverage. It's renowned for its culinary products, including wine and pasta, of course, coming from northern Italy or from the whole of Italy. The Ruhr Valley in Germany is the home of heavy industry for that area. Steel and coal, chemicals, automotive, and engineering are all heavily located within that region of Germany. Ile-de-France is again the key area within France for finance and services, aerospace, and luxury goods and technology. So slightly lighter industries than the Ruhr region, but a very key area within the EU. Flanders in Belgium. So chemicals and pharmaceuticals are very prevalent there. We've got companies like BASF. Logistics, the key logistical hubs with major ports such as Antwerp, which is one of the busiest ports in the world. And the automotive manufacturing plants like Volvo have plants in that area, as well as obviously in Scandinavia. And then finally, we've got Catalonia in Spain. I say finally, I mean, there are obviously a lot more, but these are some of the major industrial regions. Catalonia in Spain has a lot of automotive manufacturers, Seat, car manufacturer, chemicals again, textiles, and food and beverages. It's renowned for its food and products, particularly the wine industry in that particular region. And actually, finally, we've got the Netherlands as a whole, Randstad in particular. That's famous for its logistics and distribution. Rotterdam Port is again one of the largest in Europe. So you've got Rotterdam and Antwerp, which are quite close to each other, in fact, but they're two of the largest ports in the world. Finance in Amsterdam is a key sector. And then you've got high technology, high concentration of startups and companies in the Netherlands. Some strong clusters in that area. In fact, I did a presentation for specifically on the opportunities in the Netherlands not so long ago, and tech is one of the big ones. Agriculture and food. Netherlands is a leading exporter of agricultural products and food processing. Key exporter of flowers, for example, but it also imports a lot of these types of products. And another one we have is Poland, Upper Silesia. Again, it's heavier industries, mining and metals, heavy industry, automotive again, energy is another key one. And then if we're coming to the UK, where I live, Greater Manchester, that is a key industrial area. Again, a lot of technology, but the whole UK as a whole, from the sort of middle region of the UK, is the industrial base. So what are the top 10 opportunities in the EU? Well, we see that one of the key ones is technology and innovation. Software and IT services, high demand for software solutions, cybersecurity services, which is a growing demand for that. People are scared by so many data breaches and so on. So there's a big demand for these kind of things. There's always scare stories coming on the TV for the NHS or someone in big companies that have had data breaches. So that is if you're into that kind of thing, then you could find a very good market here. IT consulting as well. So advanced technology like that is very welcome, and will be a lot of imports, and the US is often viewed to be a leader in those areas from a European perspective. Artificial intelligence, of course, AI, machine learning, that's becoming more and more important, more and more people looking at that and being concerned about its scope, but also wondering how they can use it within their businesses. Healthcare and pharmaceuticals is a key one. Medical devices and equipment, of course, pharmaceuticals. We've got a number of drugs, large drugs companies in the EU, but we do import an awful lot as well. Sustainable and green technologies. Eric mentioned this, and I think that we can't stress too highly how that is a big driver for all industries, really. Whatever products you're selling, if you have a sustainable or green approach and a story to tell around that, then it will gain good traction within the market. In fact, the market is really demanding that. So that's something to really bear in mind when you're looking at entering into the European market. Renewable energy, as Eric mentioned, solar, wind, bioenergy solutions are highly sought after. Electric vehicles are becoming, much more prevalent, and the network for charging stations is growing on a daily basis. So there's a high demand for this kind of thing, and the governments and businesses themselves. I know a business in Belgium that's put in its own windmill, for example, for generating its electricity. It's a manufacturing plant for chemicals. So there is a big drive for this. And there are government incentives for businesses to invest. So if you have anything in this area, then there's definitely opportunities, as there are for energy efficiency. Everyone wants to save energy, particularly after that big hikes in energy prices that we've seen over the last few years. Energy efficiency we just mentioned. Agricultural products, especially anything which is organic or specialty foods. There's obviously already a strong importers for standard food, shall we say, and there'll be a high competition. But if you've got something a little bit different, organic, special food, something which can gain some consumer interest, then that can be a quick win as well. But Europeans are not in favor of genetically modified products, so in general, they would not get a good reception. Specialty foods as well, wines and spirits, high quality wines and spirits from American wines have grown in popularity, greatly over the last few years. Again, automotive and aerospace, the automotive parts, accessories, high performance parts, electric vehicle components, especially battery technology, is a big one. Anything which is in that line, as you can see, that's still around that sustainability, green technology kind of out area. Obviously, consumer goods, it's a huge consumer market, 452 million population. So anything to do with fashion or apparel, fashion brands, beauty or personal care, health and wellness products that were mentioned earlier. Anything like that there's a strong demand, but obviously a strong competition for them as well. But if you have a product which has a niche and a brand image, particularly around, as I say, sustainability, for example, then that can really help drive the product. Education and training services, again, e-learning solutions, online education, educational software, these kind of things, corporate training programs, specialized training services for businesses. There's a tendency to feel that there's some good new ideas that come out of the US and some ideas that could be used in the European market. Entertainment and media, of course, film content, digital media. This is all a fantastically quickly growing area, both within the EU and with demand for products and services. Food and beverage, we've already spoken about. Processed foods, unique American snacks and sauces. I think Eric mentioned that before. Processed foods, although there is a bit of a trend away from processed foods, but there's still, it's high demand, right? There are a lot of people still eat those kind of things, but particularly health foods and supplements, nutritional supplements have, good demand. Advanced manufacturing, so industrial machinery and equipment, robotic technology, these kind of things, automation solutions, 3D printing, that's becoming, big demand for that kind of thing. Cutting edge manufacturing technologies, so anything that is not available here at the moment, or is more advanced, more efficient, can offer benefits, and those are the kind of things that industries and consumers will be looking for. So what about the business culture? I have to say, first of all, that the EU is not one country. So it's very diverse across the member states. The the kind of person you'll find in Germany is completely different to the kind of person you'll find in southern Spain, for example. So you have to take that into account. You can't see it as just one country, although it is one trading bloc, which makes things a lot easier from a trade point of view. In general, the business etiquette is quite formal. We respect professionalism and politeness. Business interactions often emphasize that, and with a respect for hierarchy as well. Punctuality is another one. You know, in most countries, well, Southern Europe is a little bit different. In most countries, punctuality is definitely expected, I would say, particularly when you go to Northern Europe. Communications, well, be professional, be polite. It's key. Punctuality is expected. Communication styles do vary across the EU, though. So, you know, and you would find in Northern Europe, for example, in countries like Germany and the Netherlands, Scandinavia, they'll tend to be more direct communication. They prefer people to say what they're thinking or what's you know, what the situation is. But where you go further south, countries like Italy and Spain, they're more used to more indirect communication and taking their time about things and thinking, you know, and mulling things over and not really letting you know what they're thinking. But certainly, Northern Europe is very direct, Southern Europe more indirect. So in terms of language, English is commonly used, but certainly amongst the sort of, you know, higher management within most countries, not all countries, but most countries. But once you get below that, even within Germany, for example, I've experienced where the sort of mid to lower managers and workers, not everyone speaks English. There is a good number that do, but you can't, not everywhere. So I, for example, I had to learn German for a particular customer with a particular client many years ago, because they didn't speak English at all. So having some local knowledge or having a local contact that can support you is can be an advantage. Decision making is a hierarchical, you know, but some areas it's more consensual. So in Scandinavia, for example, they tend to talk about it and come up with a general agreement on it. But companies like Germany and France, it's been more the boss making the final decision, as we see there. And one final thing, I guess, to mention is that work-life balance. There's a strong emphasis on that, particularly where, you know, within Scandinavian countries, for example, you'll find people do leave work early. Family is very, very important, and you know the economy is built around that. So just to take that into account, it is very important to people. So there are regional differences. You know, Germany is highly structured and formal. Netherlands, more direct communication, but they do look for consensus-driven decision making. Scandinavia also more egalitarian, but also they're looking at you know, work-life balance. So, what are the key considerations for doing business within the EU? This could be sensitive about the cultural differences. Understanding and respecting local customs and traditions. Same when you go to any new country or any new area, but we must be aware that within the EU, as I say, it's 27 different cultures. You know, France is different to Germany, for example, and Italy and Spain. They're all different, so you need to be aware and don't think you can, you know, it'll be the same in all of them. Networking relationships are important. Building personal relationships and trust is important, especially in southern and eastern European countries. Networking events and social gatherings can be, you know, valuable for business development. I'd say in southern Europe, they would expect to go out for a 2-hour lunch. And, you know, that's quite common. Whereas in Germany, you're more likely to get a sandwich in the staff canteen. So be aware of those kind of differences. Eric already mentioned the regulatory environment. We'll look at that a little bit more in a moment, but it is a very complex environment with regulations vary between member states, although there are common rules and regulations as well. So understanding and complying with the local laws and regulations is really essential to be able to sell products. So things like CE marking of products is necessary to be able to import electrical products, for example, and a whole range of other products. But there are also rules and regulations around foods and sanitary products, all sorts of things. I've already mentioned that sustainability and corporate social responsibility are key drivers in the market these days, particularly consumers, but that's obviously feeding through to businesses. So you'll see virtually all businesses now on their websites making some mention of their green credentials or what they're doing for the community and things like that, what they're doing for sustainability, how they're trying to save energy and so on. It's become a selling point for the businesses, but to the point where it's almost now, if you don't do it, then you're going to lose out. So you have to take this into account. So having that, being prepared for that, having your environmental policy available, having your corporate social responsibility policy. A lot of companies have that here, so it's important to be able to show those kind of things. Particularly if you're dealing with larger companies, larger customers, they'll be looking for that kind of thing as part of their supplier evaluation. Innovation and technology. The EU places, as we've already mentioned, strong emphasis on innovation and technology. Significant investments are made in research and development. Being at the forefront of technological advancements can provide a competitive edge. So anything that you've got which is falls into that category would be welcomed. So how do you succeed in the EU? So we're seeing that there's a lot of opportunities and some barriers as well. So what do you do? How do you get into the EU? It's not one country, as we've said before, so do bear that in mind. But it is one economic area in terms of its customs rules and regulations. The market opportunities within the EU do vary. So Germany is going to give you, is a much bigger market with a much more affluent population than if you go to Hungary, for example, or to Portugal, or to some of the other countries within that. So do take that into account. You still do need to do your market evaluation to see which areas are going to give you the best opportunity for your product or service. So do your research. Make sure you know what you're getting into, what the opportunities are, what the size of the market is in your particular market, and evaluate and compare. Now, we do a lot of this at Go Exporting for our customers, where we developed a system where you can compare the opportunity in one country to another, not just looking at the size of the market or the growth in the market, but taking into account all of the barriers to entry that might stop you getting into a market, like competition, like approvals, product fit to the market, and so on and so on and so on. So we have a system comparing all of those, scoring them, and then creating sort of a league table of the sort of priorities. And you should do that for when you're looking at the European Union. So look at which are the priorities, which markets you should start with. You can't go to all the countries at once. I think that's the key thing. So you need to focus, choose the optimum ones, get into those markets. Avoid doing what I hate, which I call touch and go selling, where you start in a market, you do a little bit, and then maybe an opportunity comes up you see somewhere else, or something happens at home, and you go back and you forget about that particular market for a couple of months. But then you have to go back to it again, and then you're almost starting from below zero. So try and focus by doing that research and that evaluation from the beginning. Be realistic. Be realistic about how many countries you can go to, how far you can go. Match your ambition to your resources. That's a key element, no matter what you're doing. So one key element, another element is product or service fit. How does it fit to the market? Does it comply with local norms? What are not just regulatory norms, but what's expected in the market? Should it have a blue switch or a red switch? These kind of things, all of these kind of areas you need to look at and make sure your product is going to be suitable for the markets that you're looking at. And even within the EU, that might be slightly different in each country. With pharmaceuticals, for example, some cosmetic products, even some cosmetic products are treated as medical products in one part of the EU, or as just cosmetics in other parts. So there are different rules that apply to the same products in different areas. Although you would think there would be common rules for the whole of the EU, it's not quite like that. So you do need to do that kind of work and make sure your product fits with the local norms and the market expectations for those products as well, which again may be different to what you're used to or from the US market. Official approvals clearly are very important. You have to have those, or else you can't sell into the area. Your products will be stopped. Things like CE, as we've looked at, but other approvals as well, depending on the products. And also take into account that market taste might be different, particularly if you're talking about food products, food and beverage products. Northern Europe will have a different taste that they like compared to Southern Europe. One might be sweeter, one might be spicier, one might like wine, another one, go to Germany, probably more beer. So you've got to take these kind of things into account when you're looking at the best fit for your products. Also, the packaging. Packaging is very important. I mentioned earlier about reducing plastics within packaging. In Germany and France and spreading across the EU, there's a recycling tax, if you like. So you have to be able to show that you have some recycling scheme for your packaging when you sell products into those countries, when you're selling to consumers, and that means you have to pay something. You have to pay a sort of an insurance scheme or subscribe to a scheme that will recycle your product packaging. And if you do need to make changes, how long is that going to take? What's it going to cost? Can you wait, or we have to wait? Can you afford it? And make sure it's going to be economically viable. But the thing is about how to succeed in the market is building your value proposition. I'm sure you've heard of this before. It's not your unique selling points. It's what value are you bringing to your customer? What is the perceived value by the customers in the market? But be aware that might be different than from the US. We've already talked about the sustainability and the green elements. Those are key to the value that a European consumer might see in a product, for example. If you've got a product that might need a red switch or a green switch, well, what's the value of that to the market, to the consumer? So that's market driven, but be aware it may be different, and so your marketing, your approach to the market might be different because of that, and their market expectations. And of course, we want to avoid competing on price. So the thing is to build up this value proposition, build up this story about the product or service, so that you're not competing directly with a local manufacturer, because you're not going to be probably able to compete on price by the time you take shipping costs and potential duties and things like that into account. So be aware of that. Choosing your route to market is critical. There are obviously lots of different routes to market, direct to customer, direct to consumer. There are some difficulties with that within the EU, which we'll look at in a moment. E-commerce is clearly growing, and platforms such as Alibaba with business-to-business marketplaces are becoming huge, and they're predicted to grow even quicker over the next coming years, and they're much more growing to be bigger than consumer marketplaces eventually. Maybe look for a local commercial agent. That's someone who will represent you and go in and introduce you to the right companies, and take a commission for that. They have good contacts, they have good technical knowledge in a particular industry. There are a lot of very good ones within the European area. That's another route to market. Or a distributor, looking at someone who will buy your products and then resell them. That's one of the key, one of the most common ones, an agent or a distributor. We help a lot of companies, a lot of US companies, to find distributors, for example, in the European market, in the UK, and in other markets. Eventually, you can look at a representative office or branch or a full subsidiary, of course. But how do you find a distributor? Now, we have a free download that you can look at. You can get that from our website, goexporting.com. And it gives you some hints and ideas about how to find the best distributor or agent for your product. It's relatively easy to find a distributor. but don't take the first one. The difficulty is finding the right distributor that's going to give you the right returns, that is going to get you into the market properly and is in the right marketplace and the right sector for you. So really define your ideal partner. What is, what does a distributor look like that is going to do a good job for your product? Does that need to be a distributor or an agent? What are the differences between those? A distributor is going to buy and sell. An agent, you're going to invoice, but and pay that agent a commission. So there's a slight difference there. But in the end, they're both your biggest customer. There are positives and negatives of each, which we go through in this download, which you can look at. Do your research. Don't plump for the first one, and always try and visit them. Certainly have online meetings with them. Draw up a short list. Approach them and discuss. Understand what about those companies. Make sure you have a personal relationship with them. Make sure that someone you can get on with. You're going to rely on this company solely for your business in that particular country, if it's on an exclusive basis. So make sure that they're right, they're a good fit for you. And make sure they're a fit for your ideal profile. Get the contract right. That's another important thing. Don't give away exclusivity unless you have to. And certainly if you do, build in safeguards so that you can take it back if the results are not there. Make sure you cover all of the different things that include milestones, what stock they're expected to hold, this kind of thing. Make sure everything is covered, marketing spend, length of contract. Make sure you've got those break clauses in there and payment terms, of course. And remember that, as I said, a distributor or an agent are really your biggest customer. So you have to treat them as such. Once you've signed one, that's not the end of the story. That's just the beginning of the story. They require a lot of effort to make sure that they're doing the job that they should be doing. So what about the business-to-business challenges? If you're going to sell business-to-business, there are all shipments that come into the EU, there will be taxes on them. Some duties, it depends on the HS code or the HTS code, what duties might apply. On a lot of US goods, it seems to be around the sort of 5% mark, but there are some ways of avoiding that, of course. But one of the key taxes is VAT, value added tax, so like a sales tax. So on all goods that come into the European Union, the VAT will be charged. If you're selling B2B and that's going to a business, they should have a local VAT number, and then they can reclaim that and they will be responsible for that. It's slightly different for consumer products if you're selling direct to consumers, which we'll look at in a little while. So VAT and duty, we've got to be sure who's going to pay. The businesses should have a VAT number, and the importer needs to have what's called an EORI number, which is an economic operator registration and identification number, as well as the VAT number, and that number needs to be put onto your invoices so that it can be identified. The importer can be identified by customs. Some businesses don't want to be the importer of record, because that gives them the responsibility of the VAT. So be aware of that, and it's very key to set the Incoterms, so the trading terms between you and your customers. Make sure that you both understand exactly what you're getting into. So if you're going to sell Ex Works or CIF, then that's fine, because your customer has to then deal with the customs coming into the EU. You have to deal with CIF, you have to deal with it in the US, but they have to deal with it here. And that's the ideal situation. If someone asks you to supply DDP, so delivered duty paid, then really avoid that, because that could get you into all sorts of issues in terms of VAT, sales tax, as well as paying any import duties, and maybe some hidden costs that you're not considering there. And VAT within Europe ranges between sort of 19 and 27%, so it can be quite a hit. Obviously, you've got transport and storage costs, moving goods into the EU. So you do need, if you're going to hold stock yourself in the EU, then you need to have your own local EU VAT and EORI number. That's a requirement to be able to actually import and hold stock in your own name. You can do it, and it's relatively, you can apply for it. Customer at the moment, I'm just helping apply for a VAT number in Italy, so it can be done. It's quite common now. Certainly for UK companies after leaving the EU, a lot of them have had to apply for that. And as a US company, you would need to do that as well if you were going to hold stock in your own name. And of course, there are customs rules and regulations. As we've seen, there are lots of rules and regulations that need to be looked at, and you really need to get professional advice on that, depending on the HS code or HTS code of your product, also of your product. And your freight forwarder could be advised on that, but also obviously consultancies can advise on the rules and chambers of commerce and so on. That's where your chambers of commerce really come into their own. So there are lots of different Incoterms. If you're not aware of them, if you're already exporting, you probably are aware of them, but just make sure that you understand what the responsibilities are between you and your customer, depending on the types of Incoterms that you select. So what about direct to consumers within the EU? If you decided to do that, if you're selling small products, you might think you can send them direct, assuming there's enough margin in it. But again, you've got this issue that there are taxes, VAT on all imports. So there's VAT and there's duty, which will be charged to the consumer when those goods arrive. So you have to decide who will pay. If you're selling something for 100 euros and then you send it direct to a consumer, they were in the UK, for example, they would have to pay 20% VAT on arrival before they could get those goods. And if they're not aware of that, then obviously that creates bad feeling and will not be good for your long-term business with them. So you need to understand who will pay first, what are going to be the rules, and make sure it's open and everyone understands what the situation is. If you want to avoid the customer having to pay that, you can do it yourself and handle it and deliver what's called DDP, as we said, deliver duty paid. But then you would need a local VAT number, for example. And you would need this local EORI number. But there is a scheme within the EU which is very useful. If your consignments are below 150 euros per consignment, you can use what's called IOS, which is Import One-Stop Shop. So instead of having to have a VAT number in every European country, you effectively have one registration, and that allows you to make one return for all the VAT that goods that you would be sending into the EU. You are responsible for charging the VAT to the consumer, collecting it, and then distributing it to the authorities. It's not as difficult as it sounds because there are schemes that manage all of that for you for relatively low fees. But that's one option. It's a good option if your consignments do happen to be below that. Again, the customs rules and regulations, transport and storage costs, and of course, take into account currency. If you're selling to a consumer, they're not necessarily, or even to a business, they're not necessarily going to want to pay in dollars. They'd certainly prefer to pay in euros. So get it set up right from the beginning and understand what the situation is. Just to mention, the digital marketing is critical these days. So many business transactions start online. If you're going to drive businesses to your website, obviously things like Alibaba are brilliant at that. But also you need to look at the search engine optimization and what are the key phrases that people are searching for within the different countries, the countries that you're targeting. So if you're targeting Germany, they'll be searching in German. They won't be searching in English. And what they're searching for might be slightly different to what a US consumer or business will be searching for. So you need to do that research to understand what those terms are and target those to make sure you're driving the right traffic to your website. So in summary, the EU is a very attractive export market. It's a huge affluent population, a growing, if slowly, economy, but it's a huge economy. It's easy to do business in many ways. It's an open once you're into the EU. You've got free movement of goods around all of the different countries. So what a lot of companies do, for example, is they have a warehouse in the Netherlands or in France, somewhere like that, and they send all of their goods there so they can clear it in one go. and then they've got free circulation. They can send it to wherever they want within the EU. There are several key sectors, as we've seen, which make it very attractive, and there are high levels of English spoken, of course. But as I said, moving further down the hierarchy, if you like, in businesses, there's less English. It is a single market, which does make it, as we've just been saying, makes it very interesting. It is a customs union, but be aware of the rules and regulations, and do remember what we've been saying, that sustainability, corporate social responsibility, anything to do with recycling or environment is very important, and any story or history you've got around that will be well received. Okay, so I hope that was interesting and giving you some insights. That it's probably given you more questions in terms of specifics, but it gives you some ideas.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing, Mike. We did get a couple questions in. Let me just read them off here. This one's definitely for you. So, how is doing business in Europe different from the US? And further, what should we be careful about if starting dealing with European customers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess doing business anywhere is, in the end of the day, comes down to relationships and to building those relationships and having something that the customer wants. And so I don't think there's not too much difference from that point of view. I think the differences will come in the approach and the sort of cultural approach and so on. I think that this thing we've been talking about the green angle, as I say, is maybe it's more developed here than in the US. I don't know, but that's something to certainly bear in mind. And to be aware of, I think, or to be wary of is the rules and regulations, and making sure that you know what they all are for your product or service, and that you can you can meet them, and you've got everything in place before you actually start looking at entering the market.
Great, thanks so much. Next question here, definitely for you as well. So what can you share any specific success stories, especially around what any business did right when entering Europe?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with a number of US companies that have done well in the UK market. So one very small sort of two-person company that was selling coffee, for example, and but they did the right things in sort of researching which market, which country within Europe was going to give them the best opportunity, and was looking for the right their kind of product. So which in this case was Italy, and targeting that and concentrating on that market. And that's the key critical things, I think, is that focus and understanding your market and what's driving someone towards your product. Another company was medical products, or weight loss products, I should say, rather than medical products. And they've had huge success in the whole of Europe. And their biggest challenge was the rules and regulations, was the approvals for the product. So they had to get CE, but also there were some other wireless products, wireless certifications, and so on that they needed. So, but once they got that in place, then the demand for their product was huge, because it weight loss again is a big driver, like it is everywhere, I guess, and that really took off once they got everything in place like that. And again, they set up because they wanted to sell direct to consumers, they set up a local distribution themselves, their own warehouse, and eventually they set up their own entity. But to start with, they sold it by having their own local VAT and EORI numbers. So getting that set up right is key.
Great, thanks so much for that. And you touched on this just now a little bit, but I think we can emphasize it a little more. The one question here, what are the biggest headaches for US companies trying to enter the European market?
Yeah, well, I think it is that one of the rules and regulations. The good thing, as I say, is most of the customs rules are the same throughout. So when you enter one country, it's the same as the others. Although you do have to be aware that certain products are slightly different. So the EU grants countries the right to have their own rules on certain products if they feel it's against their national interest, for example. So that's something to be aware of, just to check on that. Particularly, it happens in sort of things like they mentioned cosmetic products that are treated differently in some countries. Some countries they're treated as a medical product or pharmaceutical product, but in other countries they're treated as a beauty product, which makes a big difference in terms of the approvals and rules and regulations that go behind it. So yeah, that's those are the key things. I think also remembering that it isn't one country, and that there are a lot of different cultures and a lot of different languages, and it's you know you do need to do that work to make sure that you're approaching you're going to the right country in the first place.
Right, right. And I really appreciate that you highlighted the language issue. I think it's something that a lot of us can forget nowadays doing everything digital. But yeah, it's a key one.
Yeah.
So last question that we'll take now is could you name any specific financial programs that U.S. businesses could leverage to start exporting to Europe?
Um, Well, I think obviously you'll know the ones in the US better than me. The EXIM, I think, is is a key one, funding orders and so on. There are a lot of schemes in each country for each European country for inward investment. So if someone's looking for that, there are a lot of incentives for that, particularly if it's something, high tech, or if there's a research and development angle to it around the clusters, around major universities, that kind of thing. So I'd say that those are probably the main innovation. The UK has a Innovation UK, it's called, which drives, and wants to attract overseas companies that have new technology, providing they're going to invest in the country as well and bring that technology here. So I think those are some of the key ones. Other schemes are obviously more tailored towards local companies in terms of support, but I think inward investment, there are a lot of incentives for that.
Right. Yeah. And just to add on to that, I did mention briefly so there's the Exim Bank. So for that does seek to drive export for US businesses. And then there's also various programs with the Small Business Association. So I just recommend you Google both of those and look into opportunities. You can see their application forms and see what you qualify for there. All right, great. So that roughly exhausts the questions for today. And would you look at the time? So I just want to thank everybody for joining today, and a special thanks to Mike for sharing this very insightful presentation with us. And I hope that anyone interested in exporting product to the EU would like to get in touch with Mike and learn about some more practical tips and ways to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for the invite to talk. I hope it was useful for everyone.
Indeed. All right. So thanks everybody, and have a very good day. Cheers.
Bye.